What happened to tax reform? Nebraska farmers are frustrated. The legislature ends its session with a chorus of nays and no deal on taxes.
It was really a small minority of senators who insisted on raising taxes.
And we talked one-on-one with Governor Pete Ricketts, his view of things. Lawmakers leave Lincoln with unfinished business. No deal on the tax relief plan they said was the top priority.
To amend sections 45, 804, 904, 907, 911.
Bureaucratic fast talk brings to a close a promising session that many say didn't live up to expectations.
Not a lot got accomplished this year, it seems like.
Tax relief was the consensus priority.
You know, at the beginning of the session, I told you this was a year that we were going to get something done. I was optimistic.
But lawmakers leave without a deal.
I'd say this year we just ran out of time.
Some say school funding needs to be part of the solution with more state dollars.
I'm a believer that with property tax relief, if we're going to do that, we also need a revenue source to replace that.
Rural lawmakers call for a special session to focus on tax reform. The governor objects.
There's a small group of senators who were fixated on raising taxes, and as long as they are continuing to insist upon raising taxes, there is no point to having a special session. It will just be a waste of taxpayer money.
Senators from central and western Nebraska would like more time to deal with taxes. Some say they're frustrated, others disappointed.
The difference between frustration and disappointment: frustrated, you give up and go away. Disappointed is we keep focusing and moving forward. And that's exactly what we're going to do with the petition drive.
While the tax issue remains unresolved, with the potential for voters to decide it, lawmakers did agree on the budget.
I'm very pleased with the work we were able to do on the budget this session, balancing that again and not taking money away from K-12 education.
And we've managed to be able to control our expenses and be able to balance our budget without raising taxes.
But taxes will remain the focus.
Property tax relief was not passed this year.
As this session comes to a close. And planting is on hold with 99% of the crop still to go in the ground. When it comes to soybeans, when do you think they should be planted? Pretty close vote here. Many say after corn, but many say they do some corn and some beans. And about 20% say beans should go in before corn. Years of research may change your mind on the best time to plant soybeans. You've done several years of research with the university that frankly surprises people, doesn't it?
Right. We have research both in small plots with the university as well as on farmers' fields. A lot of guys are thinking about planting corn right away. We'd recommend even maybe considering spreading your risk on corn, planting some in April, maybe some in May. But definitely consider planting soybeans in April. And yeah, that is a surprise to a lot of guys, Steve. But we have so many years of research, both in small plots with the university as well as on farmers' fields. And this isn't only in Nebraska, this is also in Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. And what we've shown is that the number one way to increase yield in soybeans is to plant early. And so when I say early, basically that last week of April.
You know, it's one of those things that you do things the way you've kind of always done it. You plant corn first and then you put the beans in. Here's something you can do that can increase profitability by having a better result in the fall. That's certainly something you have to consider.
Definitely. And that's something that we've had more and more growers going ahead and planting early. Like even last year, if you think about, we had that weekend in April, it was the 23rd, 24th, and it was really sunny, really warm. And I had a lot of farmers calling at that point saying, well, we've got snow and cold coming. Should we keep planting corn or should we plant soybeans? And I was recommending to switch to soybeans from the standpoint of when we talk about needing that 48 hours, soybeans take in water even faster. So maybe 24 hours is more critical. And so we saw more beans in the ground early last year than I've ever seen in the area I served. And in a high-yielding bean year like last year, really paid off for farmers.
You know, certainly there were some struggles with beans last year, but I mean, at the end of the day, We still had some pretty good numbers. I mean, we still had a pretty productive year with beans.
We had really good yields in beans, and the farmers who planted early were really happy about it. The thing that we would say, though, is that if farmers are going to plant early with their soybeans, we recommend a fungicide and insecticide seed treatment. And the reason for that is we don't have any research without those seed treatments to know, and that way it's also protecting that seed when it's in the ground early like that.
And with all of these things, people want to know more. CropWatch is a great resource.
Right, so all of our information is on cropwatch.unl.edu.
New research from the University of Nebraska says ragweed can pose a serious threat to soybean yields. Once thought to be an innocent bystander to field crop production, UNL researchers say ragweed can drastically reduce soybean yields by hogging the sunlight and shading soybeans. UNL PhD student Ethan Barnes says treatment should start before the season does.
So with weed science, we're always using preventative as opposed to like a reactive type of treatment. We always want to use a preventative. We know the weeds are going to be there because they're there every year.
Barnes says replanting or pre-herbicide can be the right step to take for farmers. He added the ultimate goal of research is to find whether it's financially viable to control ragweed or just leave it in the field so farmers can weigh the loss of the crop against the cost of killing weeds. Help is available for ranchers who suffered losses in last week's storms. Saturday's blizzard took its toll as it made its way across Nebraska, but officials telling NTV News those egg producers who lost livestock or trees can contact the FSA for guidance on how to get help.
Certainly our role here is to always help farmers and ranchers in any way that we can, and in this case that would be just spreading the word that there is help available, in this case through the Farm Service Agency. And so our main objective here is to get the word out, and certainly if there's any questions that folks have, they can contact us at Nebraska Farm Bureau as well. The USDA's Disaster Assistance Program is part of the 2014 Farm Bill. You can find those details on Nebraska.tv. Click on NTV's Grow. For a story of life and death on the ranch, we shared a post from a Custer County rancher about the efforts to save a calf born on a cold and miserable night. Leah Peterson writes, quote, "We yell on occasion, we cry, and curse Mother Nature, but then we pick it all up and carry on." Read the full story on our Facebook page. And while many go to great lengths to save their cattle, one family faces charges of animal neglect. At least 65 cattle carcasses were found by deputies on a farm near Overton in Dawson County. At least 75 other cattle, as well as llamas, donkeys, miniature ponies, and other animals were moved elsewhere for care. Officers with the Dawson County Sheriff's Office said other animals displayed outward signs of possible malnutrition and sickness. Diane Wempen, Eugene Wempen Sr., and Eugene Wempen Jr. were all arrested in the investigation and have been charged with animal cruelty and neglect. Nebraska sorghum producers are looking to what's next. China has ordered importers of U.S. sorghum to pay deposits for possible higher tariffs in an anti-dumping investigation. That equals 178.6% tariffs on American sorghum. The Commerce Ministry says U.S. sorghum was being sold at improperly low prices. CNN's Matt Rivers reports from Beijing.
Well, on a day when the Chinese government announced a third straight quarter of 6.8% GDP growth, the ruling from the Ministry of Commerce is just the latest sign that despite pressure from the Trump administration in this looming trade war, the Chinese government is simply not willing to back down. The anti-dumping investigation into sorghum exports actually started back in early February, less than 2 weeks after the U.S. first put tariffs of its own on solar panels and washing machines from different countries, including China. The Chinese government's move to put what is essentially a 180% tariff on U.S. sorghum imports is temporary for now. A final rate will eventually be determined for that. No time frame has been given, but this move is definitely a blow to U.S. sorghum producers who exported around $1 billion worth of sorghum to China last year. Now, earlier we spoke for a while to a person with extensive knowledge on U.S.-China sorghum trade, and he said that if these tariffs eventually go into effect, which he expects that they will, it will basically eliminate China as a market for U.S. sorghum. That means that all U.S. sorghum exports to China will completely stop. But in terms of actual impact in the U.S., all of that might actually sound worse than it is. U.S. sorghum producers have been expecting something like this to happen for months, if not years now, according to our source. So they have put contingency plans in place. Producers, for example, have been planning to sell this coming year's crop to other countries. But while the economic impact of all this might not actually be that huge, the signal is quite clear. GDP growth remains high. The trade surplus with the U.S. actually grew last quarter, and the economy here in China, despite some major underlying problems, remains at least outwardly quite strong. So for now, China is not going to back down from U.S. economic threats. At a Ministry of Foreign Affairs briefing shortly after these potential sorghum tariffs were announced, a spokeswoman said, quote, "If the U.S. continues to act recklessly, we stand ready to show our sword and fight to win this battle to defend multilateralism and free trade." Matt Rivers, CNN, Beijing.
Supporting young entrepreneurs in rural communities. That's an effort of the University of Nebraska. It's run by UNL professor Surin Kim and her team. The project partners high school students with rural business owners, with hopes of keeping them in Nebraska once they start their careers.
We realized the population decline is the biggest threat. Over 60 counties, Nebraska, out of over 90 counties, are losing populations, and one of the biggest causes because youth and young adults are leaving their communities.
The team will also conduct research on why young adults decide to leave or stay in Nebraska and what we can do to keep them here.
So we like to create these connections, the social connections that youth can have with their own local communities and see their future economic opportunities that they can create using entrepreneurship and technology.
The $490,000 USDA grants will bring the project to 6 communities. Kim says they're trying to cut the cycle of young people leaving the state by giving kids high-tech opportunity.